King of the Hill's 6th episode of its revival season gave us maybe our straight-up funniest premise with Bill's new barbershop antics, and also puts a nice focus on some of Peggy's post-retirement insecurities. But maybe most notably, this one has a major focus on relationships, especially on the Bobby/Connie side of things. There is a lot to dive into, so let's talk about Season 14, Episode 6, Peggy's Fadeout. And hey, if you like these breakdowns, make sure to subscribe, check out my other King of the Hill videos, and check out my uncut reaction videos to Season 14 over on my Patreon. Thanks. This message is sponsored by Raycon. Isn't it kind of a miracle when one of your favorite things comes back and actually lives up to the hype, like King of the Hill did? Well, luckily today's video sponsor is also back and better than ever. Raycon's Everyday Earbuds Classic model is now packing active noise cancellation. You heard that right, and if you didn't hear it, maybe you need some Raycons to tune everything else out. And with 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery, there's almost no reason for Raycon to ever leave your ears. Honestly, it's my favorite way to watch YouTube, listen to podcasts, or jam out to music. And with their optimized gel tips, they're going to stay comfy no matter how long they're in your ears. For the audio quality, there is absolutely no beating this price. You can even check out tens of thousands of 5-star reviews to hear from all of their satisfied customers. Go to buyraycon.com/Johnny2 to get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classic. That's 20% off Raycon's Everyday Earbuds Classic. Huge thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Please check out buyraycon.com/Johnny2 or click the link in the description to check out Raycon today. Obviously, based on the title and the initial focus for the episode, all things pointed to this being a Peggy episode. It maybe could have maintained a focus on Peggy a bit better, but it's definitely still a Peggy episode. It opens with Peggy having been rejected for a job at Heimlich Community College, and Peggy believing her experience haggling in Saudi Arabia equated to a 2-year master's degree in economics. Maybe one of my favorite Peggy ego moments of the new season. But as opposed to Hank, who spends his free time finding new hobbies and odd jobs, Peggy takes this rejection as a sign to give up.
I am just leaving academia behind and embracing retirement.
But I like that after really focusing on Hank's post-retirement woes, this one puts a spotlight on Peg and focuses less on how to fill her time and more on her fears that she actually hasn't done anything worthwhile in her life. Her search for meaning post-retirement is less about boredom and more about the insecurity that she maybe has nothing left to accomplish, that she's peaked and is in decline.
This feels like everyone else is doing bigger and better things with their lives.
They do a nice job showcasing this in small ways early. It opens by showing Min's new lifestyle blog. It feels like they make a point to show this small ad for Nancy and John Redcorn's new show, Selling Arlen. But this episode does start to intertwine with a Bill story, and it is admittedly an incredibly funny Bill story. All of the gang thinks that Bill's been lying about having other friends, and as Hank says, has fallen off the reality wagon. And to be fair, this isn't an unusual expectation of Bill given his history. Pretty Pretty Dresses is a prime example of him really falling off the reality wagon. Back then, in an attempt to cope with Lenore having left him, and so making up an entire new group of friends to cope with Hank leaving town isn't very far-fetched for the character either. But they subvert this in some really funny ways, because while Bill has definitely fallen off the reality wagon in some regards, his friends are not imaginary. I gotta say, giving Bill a story in a black barbershop is genuinely so funny and inspired. Obviously, we've gotten some great Bill Barber stories over the show, whether that was back at the military base or when he pretended to be gay to style at the salon, but black barbershops tend to be known for being these supportive pillars of their community, a place where people meet and hang out and joke and give advice. So a character like Bill, who struggles immensely with self-esteem and feeling seen and supported, finding community in one of these places, it's just a great episode idea. I mean, we also might never see something as funny as Hank getting dapped up ever again, but they essentially tie Peggy's insecurities directly to Bill's insecurities here, as both have stories about fearing how their life and accomplishments are perceived by others. Bill, as it turns out, was lying to Lucas and the boys at the barbershop about, well, all of the details of his life. He was even projecting all of his deepest insecurities onto what he told them about Hank.
Hold up. This is the neighbor you told us about? He's not fat and disgusting at all.
Honestly, though, I'm kind of shocked that Hank didn't absolutely blow up at Bill's biggest transgression here, since the entire gang seems to think that Bill is married to Peggy, complete with a huge array of photoshopped photos of her. This is so crazy. Did Bill learn Photoshop for this? Did he hire someone? But the fact that Bill is using Peggy as a means to brag about his life is exactly how it ties back to her story. Now, I do wish that this episode had maybe maintained more of a focus on Peggy. even if the supplementary Bill plot is very funny. While both plots definitely do hone in on her here, it also feels like they're a bit limited on Peggy's screen time, which I kinda hate to see in an episode that is specifically about Peggy, but I still did enjoy the way these plots intertwined.
He said being married to you makes him more confident and likable.
I love that this basically forces Peggy to reconcile with two very strong and conflicting feelings. One, her desire to be seen as successful and appreciated, and two, her disgust with Bill Dauterive. But of course, she's flattered by the way that her phony presence in Bill's life actually elevates his status. That's a pretty great and clear Peggy Hill dilemma. Side note, can we appreciate this visual gag about Peggy's Substitute Teacher of the Year awards? She's got her award for 1997 here, and then the award for 1999 has her own first name taped over another first name, an allusion to the 1999 episode The Little Horrors of Shop, when Hank was poised to win this award, but was suspended from school before they could award it to him. Very funny attention to detail for this gag, even though because of the floating timeline firmly establishing anything from the show having taken place in 1997 or 1999 is a real chronological disaster, but just don't think about it too hard. But Peggy basically wants to live vicariously through Bill's delusions here, and instead of putting a stop to them, she starts offering notes to punch up his stories.
Can you tell them that I was hired by the Heimlich Community College? No, the University of Texas.
But of course, the moment the reality of Bill's delusions hit her, particularly on the romantic side of things, she comes to her senses.
And this lie today.
Okay, while I do maybe wish this had felt a little more robust in how it intertwined Peggy and Bill's stories, and had maybe allowed a bit more of a focus on Peggy screen time wise, I truly did love this ending. The way Bill ends the lie is by killing Peggy off, which is obviously insane, but it allows for this really touching final moment. Obviously, the getting to experience your own funeral fantasy is not a new idea. I'm willing to bet many of you have even thought about this for yourselves. The opportunity to hear what people would most remember about you at the end of your life. It's an alluring idea, and they built out a premise here where Peggy actually does get to experience this. But what I found really nice is that while Bill did lie about his life to all of these people, he didn't really lie about Peggy's life. He told them who she was, that she was a substitute teacher, that she had gone to the Middle East. Bill was proud to share who Peggy truly was because he really does think incredibly highly of her.
She published her musings in the paper and adventured to the Middle East, where she mastered their languages.
And yeah, obviously she didn't master these languages, but both Bill and Peggy think she did. I just really love the idea of this ending because although it's just Bill, he has always had such a genuine and massive fondness for Peggy. And this brief little experience of Peggy getting that perspective, getting to see what she looks like to Bill as he sings her praises in front of friends, it was really sweet. It's a nice episode, and this is a nice ending, even if it's pretty silly and out there.
And although she didn't always succeed in everything, she was always an inspiration.
Okay, let's dive into Bobby's side of the episode, which I think is a tiny bit less cohesive story-wise, but does a ton to drive the more serialized nature of Bobby's revival arc. And they do this in two major ways. One, establishing the King of the Grill competition, and two, continuing Bobby's romance journey. Let's talk King of the Grill. Obviously, the name is also a meta-textual nod to the name of this show, and they make this very clear in the jokes as well.
That Texas cooking show that Fox stupidly canceled 15 years ago?
Very on the nose, but it does seem like these revivals feel obligated to throw in jabs and metatextual references like this. Futurama's first DVD movie, Bender's Big Score, did the whole Box Network gag, and then on Hulu they signed a deal with Fulu. I think this one-off line is a little more forgivable than the Fulu thing. But I really like this potential storyline they're setting up here, that Bobby wants to try and get onto this cooking competition show to help drum up interest in his cuisine and in Robota Chain. We've talked about it before, but obviously Bobby had two major loves in the original run, comedy/performance art and cooking. I love that he pursued cooking as a career, but the show has also made sure not to abandon references to his love of comedy, performing, and his previous aspirations.
With his silly dreams of being on TV and making bad jokes all day.
To me, Bobby wanting to get on a cooking competition show is a pretty great way to marry his two loves. The guy is clearly a great and inspired chef, but being given a platform where he can really embrace his showmanship alongside his actual cooking skills makes so much sense. Obviously, often these kinds of shows are just as much about the personalities and personal stories of the contestants as well as their abilities. It would be cool to see Bobby find more ways to marry his passions, but this is mostly set up for future stuff. The episode also establishes some interesting info about his business arrangements with Robota Chain, primarily primarily that he doesn't have a substantial salary because he instead took 15% ownership in the restaurant. A fascinating insight for sure, and one that also helps us understand his workaholic tendencies. He really is betting on himself here, which also means if he manages to make a name for himself on King of the Grill, that bet could really pay off. Another small subplot of this story is Bobby hiring Dale to exterminate the rat in Robota Chain. It's definitely not substantial, but I do appreciate all the ways they're finding to fit some great Dale action in this season. I feel like his plan to lure in the rat by releasing his own Judas rat into the store echoes his strategies in my literal favorite Dale episode of the entire series, Megalo Dale, when he released other rats and a mongoose into the Megalomart to try and catch Chuck Mangione. God, I love that episode. But it definitely seems like the bulk of the Bobby side of this episode is about his romantic life, which is kicked off by Bobby revealing to Connie that Chain was seen kissing another girl in public, and Connie then revealing to Bobby that they're actually ethically non-monogamous, so this was chill. People have had thoughts about this side of Connie's story, and I do have to say, anyone crying character assassination, I think is definitely projecting their own beliefs onto Connie. Now, there is a lot going on with Connie's romantic decisions in the King of the Hill revival, but we won't fully dive into the character analysis side of things quite yet because there's a lot more revealed in subsequent episodes. But I think we can talk about some of the most important aspects here. For one thing we know about Connie's childhood is that she had an incredibly overbearing father who controlled just about every aspect of her life, from her schoolwork to her extracurriculars to her dating life. Obviously, he heavily pushed for Connie to date Chain when they were younger to try and cozy up to the Wasana songs. Con even tried to bribe Bobby to break up with Connie in the episode that actually would ultimately be where Bobby and Connie's relationship ended, though mutually, not via bribe. But I think with these super overbearing teenage years, as well as a demanding workload in school, it makes sense that Connie, in her early 20s, would actually be more interested in a bit of freedom in her dating life. Now, there's a lot more to analyze in a future breakdown about why Connie would end up with Chain for this arrangement, but the important thing we know here is that a big part of it is because she isn't looking at him as a long-term or serious partner.
Do you love him? I like him. For this.
I do sort of understand why people might feel a little turned off by Connie's attitude towards Bobby here. To me, it's very clear that she likes and respects Bobby, but she's in a place in her life where she recognizes that her wants and desires don't line up with what he offers, and that she knows him well enough that he isn't interested in any kind of open relationship.
You'd end up getting hurt. And I would never do that to you.
I think this is pretty intentionally written to make Bobby feel a little condescended to. And I think that's one of the things that people aren't loving about the Connie x Bobby thing this season. But though she maybe could have said this a little more tactfully, she is absolutely right. Connie knows Bobby, and they've established pretty clearly that he is a soft lover boy type who is looking for more than no strings attached fun. Again, there will be future breakdowns to really dive into Connie's psychology behind all of this, but I think this episode establishes what it needs to. That at this point in her life, Connie isn't looking for anything serious, and of course what the episode reveals later is that Bobby is absolutely the type of person she'd be looking for if she were ready for something serious. But the other part of this story is the whole Willow connection. Bobby catches her stealing his grease so she can make soaps and balms with it, and I honestly got such a good laugh out of how this line would so specifically be a flattering turn on to Bobby.
You have good taste in fats and tallows.
Oh, thank you.
Honestly, I think Willow is a really fun character. She's a different archetype than the characters who carried over from the Arlen days, and I think her hippie-ish of the earth vibes bring a fun dynamic to the gang. But I mostly like her because she has really genuine chemistry with Bobby. Their introduction and their little drunken hang was very cute, but the awkward meeting with Connie at Bobby's the next morning also gave some pretty fun insight into why Bobby was attracted to her. For one, after Connie had been sort of condescending with the "you're not E&M material" comment, Willow basically condescends towards the entire E&M lifestyle in front of Bobby and Connie. It definitely felt like Bobby appreciated this little bit of petty payback, chuckling at her comments about it. But I think my favorite moment in this episode is this piece of advice Willow gave Bobby, recalling that he had said he was inspired to become a chef by his weekends spent grilling with Hank.
That was sweet. You should include it in your audition tape for that show.
For one, just as a fan of King of the Hill, this is exactly the type of fan servicey confirmation I'm looking for. The original run ended with this amazing shot of Bobby and Hank grilling together, and Hank promising Bobby that he'll be grilling for the rest of his life. And this confirms that they continued this connection at least until Hank left the country. But I also just think that they do a great job showcasing that Bobby and Willow have a real connection. It isn't just an empty hookup or something Bobby is doing to make Connie jealous. I particularly loved that Bobby invited invited both Willow and Connie to hang out with him and Joseph after this, and that they all genuinely seem to have a nice time. I think this season of King of the Hill could have really easily fallen into messy love triangle tropes between the Connie and Shane stuff, the Bobby and Willow stuff, etc. But it feels like they mostly handle the character relationships with a sense of maturity. Yeah, they showcase a range of feelings and opinions about the types of relationships they pursue, but that's true to life. Everyone's got a take. And I think this actually ties to the idea of this ending beat here with the 3 rats as well. Tell me if you read this differently, because I wasn't so sure on my first watch, but it turns out Dale's plan to release multiple other rats into the restaurant actually did end up catching them all, as they all just started hooking up with each other.
They were so busy fighting over each other, they didn't know what hit them.
I feel like the idea here is to highlight how the younger gang handled these romantic tensions. Obviously, there could have been messy love triangle fighting over each other, whether that's with Connie and Shane or Connie and Willow, but Bobby handled everything pretty level-headedly. He invited Connie and Willow to hang, and they all had a great time. But if they had devolved into that messy love triangle scenario, they could have easily gotten distracted from what's actually going on around them. They could have lost sight of the rest of their lives, getting caught in some metaphorical rat trap. Overall, this was just another solid episode. Not a favorite of the season, and with only 10 episodes a year, I do wish they had put a bit more focus on Peggy, since it forced her to split screen time with Bill, but I can't pretend these stories didn't intertwine in a really fun way. And it did some great work establishing some of the most important aspects of the ongoing serialized Bobby romance story. It's really fun. Good episode. And that is all I've got for season 14, episode 6, Peggy's Fadeout. Remember, if you like this breakdown, I've got the first 5 of the season up already, more for season 14 on the way, uncut reactions to these episodes over on my Patreon, and of course, tons more King of the Hill videos across the channel. Check out all of that if you're interested, and stay tuned for more. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny two cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny two cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.